for Seasons at Willow Cottage. Volume 2, Summer. By Enchanted Tales Hub. June 5th. The moss-covered steps. It was too warm to sit inside this afternoon. The cottage felt heavy with stillness. Even the bees had slowed down. So I wandered, mostly for shade. I followed the hedge beyond the blackberry bramble, where the ground dips a little and the trees grow closer. I hadn't meant to go far, just enough to stretch the stiffness from my shoulders. But then I saw them. Steps. Just barely there. Worn smooth and covered in moss, hidden beneath a tangle of creeping ivy and last year's leaves. 4, maybe 5 stone steps, leading downward into a place the sunlight hadn't touched in years. I paused. I listened. Nothing. Only the sound of leaves shifting overhead, like quiet breathing. I knelt and brushed the moss aside. The stone was cold, even in this heat. I went back to cottage and brought gloves, shears, and a woven basket, though I didn't quite know what I meant to collect. Maybe just courage. Maybe something else. The ivy came away more easily than I expected, brittle in some places, tender in others. Underneath, the steps stretched farther than I remembered. 7 in all, slick with moss and age. The scent was stronger the deeper I went, damp earth, stone, and something faintly metallic, like old keys or forgotten coins. At the bottom, a half-buried iron ring. I pulled gently, expecting resistance, but the trapdoor shifted with a soft groan, like something sighing in its sleep. It opened just enough to reveal a space below, dry, surprisingly so. A cellar, maybe, or a root house. No stairs, only a dirt slope leading down. Meanwhile, I heard voice of Eleanor calling my name. I came back with her to know what exactly is there. The cellar wasn't as deep as I feared. The slope was steep but manageable, and the earth packed firm beneath our feet. At the bottom, the space opened into a small, low room. The walls were lined with stone, and the scent of time was thick, dust, old wood, dried herbs long gone brittle. It wasn't empty. There were shelves ancient, crooked things holding what remained of old bottles, wax-sealed and cloudy. A few clay pots, a rusted tin of buttons, and in one corner, an overturned basket of dried lavender, long gray with age, but still faintly sweet. Someone had used this place. Carefully, quietly. Eleanor found a small wooden box tucked behind a beam. Inside, a bundle of yellowed paper tied with ribbon and a sprig of rosemary pressed between the pages. Recipes, notes, snippets of handwriting neither of us recognized. Not my grandmother's. Someone else lived quietly here, Eleanor said, her voice hushed. Before even her. We didn't stay long. Just enough to sweep out the cobwebs, open the space, breathe in its memory. When we left, we didn't close the trapdoor. It doesn't feel like something that needs hiding anymore. June 12th. The tiny figure, not fairy. I didn't plan to find anyone today. The morning began like many others, quiet, warm, a little muggy. I was dusting the shelves near the hearth, mostly out of habit, when I noticed something odd. The little silver thimble I keep on the mantel was missing. I'm certain I hadn't moved it. Then I saw it, a thread. Linen. Tucked behind the wood trim of the mantel and trailing, ever so slightly, down behind the stonework. I followed it. It led to the corner of the room, then disappeared beneath the floorboards near the skirting. Just a sliver of space, no wider than a coin, but enough for something small to slip through. I knelt, waited, and then I saw her. Not a fairy, not quite. No wings, no shimmer. Just small, no taller than a teacup, with nimble hands, wind-tangled hair, and clever eyes that caught the light like polished chestnuts. She didn't run. She simply looked at me, calm, as though I were the strange thing in the cottage. Her clothes were patchwork, bits of thread, scraps of dried lavender, a pin for a cloak clasp. Around her waist, a belt made of embroidery floss. The missing thimble sat beside her like a bucket, filled with tiny clothespins and folded scraps. In her hands, the tea towel. She was stitching a corner I hadn't noticed was torn. We stayed like that, still, for what felt like hours. She tied off her thread, pressed her tiny hand to the cloth as if in blessing, and passed it to me. She didn't speak, but she looked at me for a long time. Not frightened. Not exactly curious either. Just considering. Then she did the smallest thing. She touched her chest with her hand, then pointed to me. A name? I did the same. Marianne, I whispered. She didn't repeat it, but she gave a nod soft and sure. She stepped forward and in a very soft voice, like a hush, she said, "My name is Lynette." I gave a soft nod and thanked her for fixing cloth. I offered her to join me in kitchen for snack, gave her the tiniest spoonful of plum jam on a porcelain saucer, which she accepted with both hands and quiet dignity. Lynette. Her name fits, soft, wild, and shaped like something that lives in hedgerows and forgotten corners. Then she told me her story. She came from a line of thread keepers, she said, caretakers of quiet places. Not fairies, not spirits. Something older. Something smaller than legend. They live in the spaces that don't belong to anyone, behind the hearth, under the root of a tree, between the beams of old kitchens. They mend what breaks. They remember what others forget. Long ago, this place belonged to someone else like me. Someone who listened. Someone who wrote letters to herbs and pressed flowers not to dry them, but to thank them. Lynette watched her grow old, then waited through the in-between, the years the cottage stood empty, but still awake. Until one day, the door opened again. Me. You smelled like rosemary and dust, she said. And you talked to the kettle. I laughed, surprised. She smiled. She didn't tell everything. Her story is long and told in pieces. But that was enough for today. She stayed until the noon, then tucked herself beneath the curtain, vanishing like a loose thread slipping through fabric. July 5th, picnic beneath the alder tree. The sky today was made for a picnic, high, bright, and full of soft clouds drifting like thoughts. The kind of summer day that feels like a held breath, a pause in time where everything is content to just be. Eleanor stopped by just after morning with a wide-brimmed hat and a smile. "It's a picnic day, isn't it?" she said, already holding a basket of her own. We packed quickly, the lavender sugar scones, wrapped in linen, a jar of apricot jam Eleanor brought, sweet and sticky, little hand pies I made with yesterday's lamb and rosemary, still warm from the oven, a bottle of chilled rosehip cordial, fresh plums, tucked in between layers to avoid bruising, and from Eleanor, a wedge of her sharp cheddar wrapped in wax paper, and a surprise jar of pickled radish, tangy and perfect. We walked up the hill behind the orchard, where the alder tree leans just so and the grass grows wild and soft. Clara joined us halfway there, with a bag of strawberries and a blanket under her arm. The three of us spent the afternoon eating, talking, and watching the breeze play with the meadow grasses. There was laughter, but not the loud kind, the kind that bubbles up gently from the deep well of feeling known. We didn't go straight home after the picnic. Instead, we lingered. Eleanor and Clara helped shake out the blanket and repack the basket, but none of us were quite ready to leave the warmth of the meadow or the soft ache of a day well spent. So we stayed, watched the sun dip low behind the orchard trees, turning the sky into a watercolor of peaches and lavender. As the light faded, the air cooled just enough for shawls and shared thermos tea. We lay back on the blanket, three figures wrapped in wool, shoulders brushing now and then, eyes tilted upward. And then, slowly, the stars came. First just one, then a scattering, then the whole sky unfurled. We pointed out what we knew, Orion's belt, though it was faint in summer, the curve of the Big Dipper, and the bright planet near the horizon, Venus, Clara said confidently, and none of us corrected her, even if we weren't sure. Eleanor told a story about how her grandfather used to name stars after people he loved, even if they already had names. Said the sky didn't mind, as long as you meant it kindly, she smiled. I didn't say much, just breathed in the cool, dark scent of the grass and watched. There was something steady about the stars. Not magical, exactly. More like faithful. For a long time, none of us spoke. Not out of silence, but out of comfort. When we finally walked home, the moon had climbed high and the crickets had taken over where the birds left off. Back at the cottage, a sprig of thyme had been left on my windowsill. No note, just a gift. A quiet hello, or maybe a thank you. From Lynette, I think. July 16th, lunch from the forest. I didn't plan to have company, but that's often when the best kind arrives. Eleanor knocked just as I was slicing the chanterelles, her cheeks pink from the breeze and her hair pinned up in a way that always looks both practical and perfectly wild. She peeked into the kitchen and grinned. Is that sorrel I see? And mushrooms? Tell me there's tea. I set the kettle on at once. We didn't dress the table formally, just cleared the papers and jars, laid down a soft linen runner, and opened the window wide. The meal came together as if it had always meant to be shared. Here's what we made: sautéed chanterelles in butter, garlic and thyme, sorrel and woodruff salad with a lemony dressing and slivers of sharp cheese. Crusty bread Eleanor had tucked in her basket, just in case. Blackberry compote. Simmered gently with a touch of honey, thick mugs of nettle and chamomile tea, poured steaming and green. We ate slowly, like the food asked us to. Talked about small things, Clara's new chickens, the rain barrel that cracked, a shop in the next town that sells tiny carved spoons. When we were in middle of conversation, Lynette appeared, landing softly on the table between us, brushing off her knees like someone stepping off a long train ride. Eleanor blinked, then smiled. So you're the tiny one." "I am," Lynette replied, quite matter of fact. "Marion told me about you, the little fixer." Lynette grinned. I swear she looked pleased. And just like that, it wasn't strange. We offered her to eat with us, and she accepted with great ceremony. We continued talking about everything and nothing, the best way to store mint, why bees sometimes disappear mid-flight, whether or not plum trees actually remember last year's frost. Later, we sat on the back step together, the three of us. Eleanor hummed. Lynette curled up in the crook of a garden glove. I let the sun warm my bare toes. No magic. No mystery. Just a new friendship fitting into place like a stone in the palm. August 11th, corn fritters with honey butter. Some days call for frying. Not fancy frying, just the kind where something golden bubbles up in a skillet and the smell makes you smile before you've even taken a bite. This morning I picked corn from Eleanor's patch. She gave me 3 ears with sun on their backs and silk still curled like hair. I carried them home in my basket, listening to their husks rustle like old letters. By noon, I was in the kitchen making fritters. Here's how it went. I peeled the husks in the garden, sitting on the back step. Lynette helped, mostly by collecting the silk to weave into a rug, which she assured me was very fashionable in small circles. I scraped the kernels into a bowl. They fell like golden confetti. Added 1 egg, a spoonful of flour, a little baking powder, salt, and cracked pepper. A dash of chili flakes for brightness. Stirred it all into a thick, lumpy batter. It smelled sweet already. Heated butter and oil in the skillet until it sang. Dropped the batter in small rounds, letting them crisp at the edges. They puffed a little, turned golden. The scent was something between fresh bread and summer fields. In a tiny dish, I mixed a spoon of softened butter with a drizzle of honey and a whisper of lemon zest. That was the magic. We ate them hot, standing in the kitchen. Eleanor said she'd just try 1 and then had 3. Lynette licked honey butter off her fingers like it was treasure. They taste like summer fireworks, she said. Only softer. Some flavors are shy, but corn and honey? They dance on your tongue like sunlight skipping across water. August 27th. Roasted eggplant dip with yogurt and mint. It was too hot to cook. Even the sun seemed to give up by afternoon, sinking behind the trees early, like it had somewhere else to be. The cottage was quiet. The kind of quiet that asks you to lower your voice and move slowly. I didn't want a full meal, just something cool, smoky, and soft. So I made eggplant dip. I pricked 2 small eggplants with a fork and set them straight onto the oven rack. No tray, no foil, just heat and patience. They roasted for nearly an hour until they collapsed in on themselves, skins blackened and juices hissing. I let them cool while I prepped the rest. I scooped out the soft flesh, smoky and pale, and stirred in a spoon of Greek yogurt, a drizzle of olive oil, crushed garlic, just half a clove, salt, lemon juice, black pepper, a scattering of chopped mint from the garden. It came together with almost no effort. Just a swirl of the spoon, a sigh of herbs. I served it in a shallow bowl with toasted flatbread triangles and a few slices of cucumber. Eleanor took one bite and went quiet, the good kind. Lynette dipped her finger in and nodded solemnly. Tastes like shadows in a good way. We ate on the back steps, the sun melting behind the trees, the crickets starting to sing. The air was still warm, but the edges of the day had cooled. So had the season. Something was shifting. Some flavors are louder. Others whisper. This one whispered the end of summer.